4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we're started.
Ooh, episode 5.
5, I think. 5. It's been
6.
over a month. I think it's 5. I'm pretty sure it's 5.
Dang.
Yeah.
Episode 5. Special celebration for episode 5.
Yeah, it's a big landmark. Episode 5. We're halfway to double digits on episodes. No. Okay, so I wanted to talk to you about, we talked a lot last week about Kamala Harris, since that was kind of the big political news of the week. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about why we, or me at least, dislike her as a choice for vice president or president. And one of those big things was the story of Kevin Cooper, who was a death row inmate in California, and Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, called for a new DNA test because more evidence had come up on that story, and Kamala Harris blocked it. Basically, she didn't want another DNA test to kind of determine his innocence.
So how did the evidence end up coming out?
So I don't know specifically how the evidence that led to them calling for this DNA test was came out, but once the DNA test did come out, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, he was proven innocent by the DNA test.
Yeah.
So Kamala Harris was basically just trying to keep a death row inmate on death row for those DNA tests are like $20. They can do them for $20. And yeah, that's crazy. So I think it's very hypocritical of her to try and say that she's all about criminal justice reform when she was in a position where she had power to do that, to reform that system. She was worse. She did stuff like that.
She was charging mothers for not sending their children to school.
Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, in communities like that, it's so important for children to have kind of parents, like in places where a child needs a parent to provide for them, like help with that. And she was sending parents to school for their kids, or not to school, to jail for their kids skipping school. Just blatant abuse of power in that position as DA.
Yeah, and the frustrating thing is, like, on both sides, like, that's such a damaging story, but like the Republicans are so focused on like, oh, you snowflakes, like you babies, like you socialists, like that's such a damaging story.
Yeah, it's weird. It seems like on the Republicans, or even both sides, focus on the wrong things.
The Democrats are better at focusing
they are better
on the right things,
yeah
though.
But the Republicans, it's weird. It's like there's very valid criticism of the Democratic candidates, and they go with,
Sleepy Joe
Biden, and
he can't form a sentence.
Nasty Kamala Harris, and just it doesn't make sense. You should go after that, and I think part of the problem is they might not be better on criminal justice reform.
Look at what Tulsi did. She took a jab at what you were talking about, and Kamala Harris's poll ratings went.
She was gone. Yeah, that tanked her campaign. So it's like, why aren't the Republicans focusing on that? One of the other crazy things that Harris did was so in California they use prison labor to fight fires.
Mm-hmm. I have heard about that.
She basically, she talked about how decreasing, I think it had something to do with decriminalizing drug use, or somehow getting these people out of prison would cripple California's like firefighting force. She wanted to keep people in prison longer so that they could be used in what really should be illegal. It's basically slavery. It is slavery. It's like in the 13th Amendment. They make $1 an hour. In the 13th Amendment, it says slavery is not legal unless it's for incarcerated. Like, incarcerated people are allowed to be enslaved. And she basically wanted to exploit that system to keep the firefighting force
That's
larger.
scary. Or how about when Bloomberg was running, it came out that prison labor was being used to make campaign calls, like random, telemarketer calls. Did you not hear about this?
I didn't hear about that
This
at
was
all.
a big story. So when Bloomberg was running, they I can't remember who came out with it. It had to have been some like the New York Times or the Washington Post, because it may have been Fox News. I'd be bad, but
It wasn't Bloomberg News.
yeah, it wasn't Bloomberg Media. But so he was using prison. He says he didn't know anything about it, but someone in his campaign knew about it, because they were using prison labor that's like contracted by, one of these massive like employment companies, but they were making like telemarketer calls from prison, like, hey, have you heard about Mike Bloomberg for president? He's gonna be the richest president ever.
Jeez, it's so crazy how a lot of the Democratic candidates ran on, I mean, not completely, but a major part of their platform was talking about kind of criminal justice reform and social issues like that. And then turn around and, I mean, you said Bloomberg was using prison labor for their calls. Kamala Harris has a record of exploiting prison labor or trying to exploit prison labor for them to be firefighters, like dangerous jobs. So they're in a place, they're just being exploited. And their record on that is pretty clear. Like Kamala Harris's record on that is pretty clear. And they still went with her for the vice president pick.
It's weird, huh? It's and Joe Biden. Joe Biden had here's like another big talking point the Republicans could use. Joe Biden had 8 years with Obama to enact criminal justice reform, they did nothing.
You did nothing. And I mean, I don't know for sure, but from what I understand, I feel like Trump has done more.
Yeah,
he passed
reform. A criminal justice, like he passed a bill, like an actual bill got passed, a bipartisan bill with the Senate.
And that's
Democrats
Trump.
and Republicans came together.
That's Trump, like the lowest bar. Like you barely need to do anything to top that bar.
Yeah.
And they didn't do that when Joe Biden was in power for 8 years.
Van Jones, do you know him? He's a CNN contributor.
I think so.
So they were having this big convention. I believe he was a part of this criminal justice reform bill. Like he was like what's it called? Those people that special interest people,
like
that
a lobbyist
or whatever
yeah.
for it. So they were having like this party convention, whatever. Trump was going to be there. He wasn't holding it. It wasn't like the Trump campaign doing it, but Trump was going to be there. A bunch of high up like Democratic people were going to be there, like I think Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, all those guys, a bunch of Democratic senators. Kamala Harris was going to refuse to go because Trump was going to be there. And Van Jones, who is a CNN contributor, as liberal as they get, he's fought for criminal justice his whole life.
Oh, yeah.
As liberal as they get, he went on CNN and burned Kamala Harris. He was like, this was such a great thing. Like how are you just not going to support anything that one person does?
Well,
like you can take the good and the bad.
That?
Like you can take the good and the bad for Trump. Like when he does something good, you don't have to balk at him. Like I don't get it.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It seems, and I mean, everybody does it. A lot of like, there's extremists on both sides.
And the Republicans are the same way.
Yeah,
if Barack Obama did something good, they'd never celebrate it.
No, nothing. Yeah, so it's like, how can you not just take their, as politicians that represent the people, they should be focused on the best interests of the country. So when there's something that's objectively in the best interest of their constituents, which is people, I mean, for president, it's the entire country, every citizen, they should recognize that. They should recognize that as a good thing. And a lot of time they don't do that. If it's Trump or whoever, I mean, we talked about it last week with the kind of peace deal between the UAE and Israel.
Yeah.
It's been widely criticized by kind of leftist politicians, even though I don't see a problem, like where it's a bad thing anywhere. It doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah, it's weird. It's not a bad thing anywhere, but you can spin any story in the media to sound bad, right?
Oh, yeah.
You could, I mean, you could literally like take the best thing that any president has ever done, and like Fox News or CNN will find a way to spin it to be bad.
if it's from the.
And like that's just bad journalism. I don't get it.
It doesn't make any sense at all to me.
Where has the standard of journalism gone?
It's down the drain.
Where did it break down? Break down at Trump? Did it break down at Obama, Clinton? Where'd it go? When did it stop?
I think it started to break down like probably during the Obama administration.
Really? I think well before that.
You think? I don't know. I think, but where it really like came to the front and became like a super serious issue was leading up to the 2016 election.
Yeah, for
I mean,
sure.
in that campaign, that's where it became just abysmal. The standard was so low that, I mean, it's not even recognizable from good journalism from, I mean, in the past. Obviously, we're both pretty young, so we haven't, it's been a long time. Like, it's been bad for a significant portion of our lives, but I think that's where the real crux of the issue has kind of come down to it.
I may have mentioned this before on the podcast, but the former head of NBC he is now the head of CNN, Jeff Zucker. He was the head of NBC, and they hired him at CNN because ratings were, and now that he's at CNN, everything got much more like biased, much like journalism is out the window, gone.
That's crazy. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, so he was at NBC. He was there when like the only reason I learned about this is because Conan, all that stuff that happened with Conan.
Oh, like
Jeff
with the
Zucker
late
was
show, or late
at
night
the
show.
tippy top of all that stuff
dang.
with Conan.
Yeah, it is weird. You have to be careful with like talking. It seems like there's a lot of media companies are controlled by very few companies. So like I've seen edits where they'll compile like a bunch of different local news stations and they're all saying the exact same thing and the exact same words, and it's kind of freaky actually to see like they're all out of sync, and then they line up for like specific keywords and phrases that they're obviously being fed. And it
looks like state-run media.
It looks
what it looks like.
Yeah, it looks like state-run media.
Journalism is very important. We journalists are among the most trustworthy people you will ever meet, and it's like 40 different news stations all saying the same thing.
So I think independent journalism is something that is one thing that's keeping our democracy like more free than if places like journalism on YouTube and other independent sources. One of my favorite sources is The Hill.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And Rising specifically, their show Rising. They have the two hosts. One's a not traditional conservative, but a conservative, and one's more liberal. And they're not afraid to call out people on either side. They bash on everybody if they do something that's not in the best interest of the American people. And so I think we need more news sources like that. And that's the only way to fix journalism. There's no way with the major like news companies like the New York Times or Washington Post, CNN, Fox. Those aren't going to get fixed. Those are only going to get worse. So it's only going to be when people start turning to independent sources that you'll get the media will start to fix itself and play the correct role in our country.
I almost disagree. I think that the media is at a point right now where outrage is getting views. So it's like, it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. The Supreme Court has already held that you can be right or wrong in media.
Oh, yeah. And I think they have to publish like a retraction if they're wrong. But the retraction gets nowhere near as many views as the initial story. Yep. They publish a outrage clickbait story and then get proven wrong like immediately. And 3 days later, they publish a little article saying, "Oh yeah, sorry, we were wrong about that." At the
very bottom in like size 2 font.
Small font, yeah, exactly. And 5%, maybe less, of the people that saw the original story will see, especially with like Twitter and stuff, because they'll just tweet out the headlines and people respond to that. They don't even read the article, and then they don't see the retraction. They don't even have to like tweet out the retraction. It's just people interacted and saw, and it gets shared over and over again. And it's I agree with that's a big problem, that outrage media has become so popular and so profitable. It's the only thing that's profitable for them anymore, is when they can get people to click by making people angry.
I saw an article that said Tucker Carlson's show got more ratings than the NBA and CNN combined. I saw an article that said that. It probably wasn't from a trustworthy source, so someone will have to double check it. But I wanted to ask you about this. This is a subject I find really interesting. In your thoughts, should churches be tax exempt?
I don't know. I think it's difficult because there's some that I think there should be a bar that's lower for churches, like for religious organizations. I think there should still be a bar that they have to meet as far as like charitable donations, how much of it is going towards like just internal things. I think that's a difficult question because it's a tough line to draw of where is, I mean, the Church of Scientology is the largest landowner in Los Angeles, and they're tax exempt completely.
Well, and you know why they like buy so much land is because to be a nonprofit, you can only have a certain amount of liquid cash, like easily accessible cash in the bank. And so they just are like, oh, we're getting close to our cash threshold.
So they buy land and real estate. Yeah, exactly. But then there's also the flip side where religious organizations can do a lot of good that comes from the money that would be taxed anyways. So it's difficult for me to say, oh, well, these people, especially from donations, like donations from people, that being taxed seems like weird to me, taxed on both ends. Or because it doesn't get taxed for the person giving it.
It's a deduction.
It's a deduction, but that's because it's because they're characterized as nonprofits and these kind of not tax havens, but like just you can't, that donations aren't taxed, and then so it seems weird to me that you would tax it on the other end when it's coming out. So I don't know if you can really, I think it's difficult, and I don't know how you do it, and I think it's being exploited, but also I would rather have it exploited by some people when, in my opinion, the majority of religious organizations aren't really exploiting that and are actually doing good with the money they receive.
What are your thoughts on religious influence in politics? Acceptable or not acceptable?
I think that's part of the larger conversation with all special interests. It's an organization that has a set of values and would like those values perpetuated in law. And so I think it just.
But there is a specific constitutional amendment that says, religion and state shall be separate. Like this is like a specific constitutional requirement.
But I think there's a difference between. So I don't think you should be able, like, pushing specific religious beliefs as far as like doctrine in religions. I don't think, like, I think that's more where church and state comes in. And I think religion just acts as a special interest group that, because if you start to say, I mean, what's the difference between a religious organization asking, like, wanting some political, like something, lobbying for something as the NRA, or
the religious organization is specifically like addressed in the Constitution.
But why? Why is it different?
What do you mean?
I don't know why that should be something different than any other special interest group.
I don't know either, but I think Would you agree that the amendment in the Constitution says specifically there is a separation between church and state?
I think it applies more though to like you couldn't have a state religion that you have to do.
See, I disagree. I think it's pretty broad.
I don't know, because I would say that's kind of arbitrary. It's arbitrary that you would say specifically religious organizations are the only special interest groups that can't lobby for their beliefs.
Yeah, a little arbitrary.
Extremely arbitrary. So I think the intention was more that we are not going to we're not going to force a certain religious doctrine on people. I don't know if that makes sense. Like you can't have, like, you're not going to have the Bible
I see
taught
what you're
in
saying.
school.
I interpret it as more vague, as like there has to be a separation between, because take for instance in Utah, right? We live in a state where the LDS church, I don't know if you're going to agree with this, but dominates politics, or certainly has a major influence on state policy, right? That to me should be illegal. And I don't know why no one has like sued to like say this is unacceptable, that the church is like, this Utah's an extreme example of why that, in my opinion, and of why that constitutional amendment applies here, because there are policies that are literally agreed upon, and in the final hour, the church sends a letter that says we don't agree with this because A, B, and C, and the bill is dead.
Yeah,
like, that kind of stuff is unacceptable.
But that happens with like the NRA too.
Sure.
So
I agree. I agree.
I don't think you should go and take in the way. I mean, the NRA and religious organizations are obviously like very different, but they are both special interest groups that have a bunch of members that kind of all believe the same thing, have similar political interests. And so to say, oh, the NRA can lobby, but a religious organization can't,
so do you not not disagree that it's different when a person's church or someone's religion is advocating something? Don't you think they have a different kind of responsibility to that religious organization than the NRA? Because I think they do. I think that if I was a religious person and my church came out and said, if you support this, like, God hates this, so if you support this and blah blah blah, I would feel a special responsibility to change my opinion.
I mean, it could be like that, but you can't determine that. I mean, I'm sure there are people that are as committed to the NRA and like Second Amendment rights as there are to religious organizations. So to make that distinction seems entirely arbitrary to me.
Right, but you're using two things that you're using what is like a political issue, right? The NRA is like a political issue, whereas the church has a set of values and ideals, right?
But so do, I mean, what's a Second Amendment? Like, those are values and ideals about the Second Amendment, and they're applying that to political issues. I don't know. I just think that it should be treated like a special interest group. And I think special interest groups should be way more highly regulated than they are now. And that applies across the board to any special interest group.
So you do not see, let's take this like to you. So you don't see a problem with a church influencing a congressman or woman's decision in a case or in a bill, on a bill. You do not see an issue with that on a massive scale.
No, I do, but in the broader sense that...
But you see the issue with everyone.
With any special interest group is the same. And so if you're going to start determining what special interest groups are... And I think there's a difference between if a religious organization says, like, just states their position on a matter, and also if they start spending money to, like, actively... like lobby.
And the LDS church does have lobbyists.
Yes. So I think that should be regulated, but across the board. There's a million special interest groups that lobby like that should be way more heavily regulated. And special interests play too big a role in politics to me. And I think that applies whether it's a religious organization, the NRA, like the NAACP, like any of those organizations shouldn't have as much political power as they do.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I think special interests are... I think... See, I've heard there's like people that will try to defend special interests. Like, these Congress people wouldn't know about this issue otherwise, or we just go in and inform them. It's like, I don't really know if I subscribe to that view.
And I think there's
I'm sure they do get informed, but it's like, I also think they get informed with the massive check you write them too.
Yeah, there's
I'm
a
sure
difference.
they care about that massive check more than they care about any information you have to give.
Yeah, there's a difference between between just spreading information. Like, a special interest group can educate, is like, I think that's entirely okay. If their entire point is to bring attention to an issue,
yeah,
totally fine. But it's when when politicians become beholden to special interests because there's financial incentives to do that.
What about when they become beholden to special interests because they feel a obligation morally to?
I think, though, it's up to the constituents. I think that's disclosed to a certain extent, but you have to do what's best for your constituents, and you shouldn't be a politician if you're not going to do that.
So that would be immoral.
If your constituents didn't agree with you and you were doing something that went directly against if
you were doing something, okay.
yeah. So like,
I would agree with that for sure.
If it was,
for example, in Utah, when the Prop 2 got passed, which was the legalization of medical marijuana.
Yeah.
And this was a while ago, so I'm not totally informed about the situation, but they took it to a vote to the people. So the Utah public voted in favor of Prop 2. And then the Utah legislature just didn't want to enact it. Like, there was a bunch of issues. Like, they couldn't figure out the funding. They didn't know how they were going to do it. Yeah. And at one point, they were like, we're not going to do it. I was like, what the heck? What is this?
Yeah.
Like, that's like Brexit in freaking Britain.
Yeah. Or even, there's a lot of times that you see with, like, oil companies and stuff like that where they're even directly harming constituents of people, but because they have lobbyists and people in Washington talking to the politicians, you get stuff that directly harms constituents, like destroys the environment. You get that, and that's where special interest groups are a problem, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the DNC and the RNC, specifically the lineup of speakers at both of them, because they are.
The RNC is crazier though.
RNC
the DNC has
weird.
has everyone who you would expect to talk at the DNC, but the RNC has
is a mismatch.
Kid Rock.
All over the
place.
It
has the family that carried the guns at the protesters.
It's got the MAGA, the Covington kid.
The Covington kid that sued and is a freaking millionaire.
So,
that kid's rich, dude.
Actually, he's not. I don't think he's that rich. I think so. The initial lawsuit would have made him mega rich. I don't think they paid him out anywhere near the value of the lawsuit.
Really? Because I heard it was in the millions, though. He settled for in the millions.
I heard that it was like a very small amount, like
really
less than $100,000.
See, that's not what I heard.
But
that's interesting.
But just a crazy lineup of really random speakers, which is so.
Who else? Oh, the doctor. Did you see the doctor?
The crazy,
What
weird.
was her thing? Like the demon something? She was like saying.
I can't remember. There's something
demon, about witchery or.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's funny because you can see why both sides did what they did, because the RNC is trying to appeal to like
Trump voters,
yeah, exactly. That like are kind of all over and are like anti-establishment. So we want the Covington kid that's like railing against the media, the family from, where was it, like Arkansas, Oklahoma, or whatever, that were they carrying the guns.
Oh, that was Michigan, right?
Or Missouri. That's what it was. Yeah,
Missouri.
The Missouri couple to rail against like kind of the political system, the doctor to rail against whatever, coronavirus, whatever. Yeah. And then the DNC is coming at it with
Obama,
people,
Michelle Obama, Bill
it's
Clinton,
the establishment. They're coming at it.
The establishment.
It is
the
embodiment of
the
the
very
establishment.
root of the establishment is showing up to the DNC.
Yeah.
John Kasich was there.
Yeah, it's like
I actually really like John Kasich, so
it's
I'm not gonna say anything bad about him.
It's a menagerie of the Democratic establishment and like never Trump or Republicans.
Yep.
Like they had like 3 or 4 Republicans talking. They're all just like never Trump or Republicans.
Who do you think went to who? Do you think the DNC went to those never Trump Republicans, or do you think those never Trump Republicans went to the DNC?
I mean, they're basically a wing.
I'm surprised Mitt Romney wasn't there.
Yeah.
I could see Mitt Romney showing up.
Oh, I could see that too for sure. But I bet for sure it was the DNC. Is
really?
Just because the way they win is if they can convince moderates to vote for Democrats instead of Trump.
Yeah. And dude, I think that like Mitt Romney was like the Democrats' hero. He was like their knight in shining armor for a long time.
Weird.
Nancy Pelosi was like, God bless Mitt Romney. He stuck to his heart and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, you're kind of talking about, he's
it's
like
just very
borderline
hypocritical
war criminal.
because it's like, it's just whoever agrees with them in the moment. Or
I know.
It could have been specifically
yeah.
in like if Mitch McConnell came out and like blasted Trump, and
they
like,
would have been like, oh,
yes,
Mitch,
awesome, Mitch
oh,
McConnell,
Mitch, my savior.
There's nothing. It's just if you hate Trump, you're good. I mean, like there's the Lincoln Project. That's the like
that
supposed
familiar.
to be.
What is that?
It's like it's the Republicans Against Trump kind of organization, like super PAC that will like run ads and stuff. That's basically just a wing of the Democratic Party, and it's funny that you can even as crazy as the RNC speakers were, and as kind of expected as the DNC speakers were. I think it reveals a lot about what both parties are focused on and what their kind of goal of the conventions are.
Yeah, the DNC wants the status quo. They want to put Joe Biden in, who has been in politics his entire life,
For
the majority of his
40,
life.
50 years.
Yeah. This guy was around when literally segregation like issues were
just
taking place.
Absurd amount of time. And
scary.
Hasn't really changed any whatever, but their whole idea is that like, we don't want. It's weird because it's a weird balancing act for them, because you've got the left wing of the party that wants drastic change. They want a ridiculous amount of change, and then you have the further right wing of the party that
of the DNC.
Yeah, not the right wing, but that kind of wants the status quo, and the only way they win is by appealing to both sides. Like they have to appeal to both sides, like the moderates and the right wing.
They haven't so far.
It's crazy to me. It seems like they're struggling to, and that's a super difficult balancing act, because on one side you have people calling for kind of the destruction of the status quo, the tearing down of the establishment, and then on the other side you have the establishment that is kind of comfortable for voters.
And I think if the Democrats lose this election, the next candidate they run is going to be very, very progressive. They would be, okay, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Because if they run Hillary Clinton and then Joe Biden, and then they run someone like another Joe Biden in 2024.
It's like running Hillary Clinton 3 elections in a row.
And I think the Democratic Party is starting, Democrats are starting to more critically analyze the establishment. I think both sides are getting a little bit more populist. This is starting to get really corrupt. I think people are starting to realize that.
Recognizing that. Yeah.
On the left, that's you saw Bernie. He would attack the establishment. Yeah. He was like the liberal Trump.
That bugged me about Bernie a little bit, because he went and attacked the establishment and everything, and then especially in this election, kind of just turned around and was like, "Oh yeah, go Joe Biden." And I was like, it's kind of a sell. It's the same problem I had with Yang. As I liked Yang. I probably would have voted for Yang if he was. He was my favorite Democratic candidate.
Really, and I wouldn't have.
But he finished his campaign and then took a job as an analyst with CNN, and I was like,
yeah.
Part of your platform was talking about the media and how problematic it's been, and then you just go and take a CNN job.
Ooh, that money smells good.
Yeah.
To all those politician wannabes.
But yeah, I don't. So you think they'll go further left with their next
I don't know.
candidate?
I think the DNC is. I think they're a bunch of idiots. I think the RNC knows what they're doing, and the DNC is a bunch of idiots. And I'm a Democrat.
Yeah.
Like the DNC is the most mismanaged crap hole I've ever seen. The fact that they ran Hillary Clinton and then thought it would be a good idea to run Joe Biden is mind blowing.
Doesn't make any sense.
It's mind blowing.
Well, it's weird because what they do is they appeal to like the left wing of the party on issues that don't matter. That matter but are very surface level.
Yeah.
Aren't really enacting real change.
Sure.
And then they appeal to the right wing of the party with
major policy.
Or
like
foreign policy,
yeah.
Most domestic policy. I mean, you're never going to see Nancy Pelosi advocating for free healthcare or free college. The establishment and the Democratic Party.
I think
isn't
Nancy
gonna do that.
Pelosi, you will. I don't think Chuck Schumer for sure, or Joe Biden.
Yeah, but Nancy Pelosi also.
She's like a fake though.
I think
fake
she's
Democrat, like a fake progressive.
Well, I mean, she pushed through a higher military budget than Trump asked for. Trump asked for a certain value, and she pushed through a higher budget.
I don't get it.
For the military,
dude, it's because, what's it called? The war
military-industrial complex.
Take the words right out of my brain. That has that's probably I don't know that much about it, but I'm sure that it's even bigger than oil.
Oh, it's the biggest special interest in the world.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
just billion-dollar contracts just
we have
thrown
been
out
in
to
Iraq
everybody
for 20 years.
It's the most profitable.
Not Iraq, but
the Middle East, yeah.
The Middle East, yeah.
It's the most profitable business you can be in is war profiteering. What's so funny is that in popular culture, media, whatever, the war profiteer is always the bad guy.
Yeah.
And in real life, there are politicians. Think back to the first Iron Man movie. That's when he becomes the good guy, is when he stops making weapons and selling them to whoever. Yeah. And the bad guy is the one that wants to keep doing it. And then we go and elect Joe Biden, who's beholden to the military.
The Obama administration carried out hundreds, if not thousands, of drone strikes, killing who knows how many civilians.
90% of the deaths from Obama drone strikes were civilians.
There you go.
90%.
That's called murder.
And that's
murder.
That's the savior of the Democratic Party that's all propped up and is.
Would you classify that as murder? Do you believe that is morally murder?
Yeah. No, I think so, and I think it's difficult. I don't know if there's an acceptable, I don't know if there's an acceptable kind of level of that. Mm-hmm. Certainly not 90%. I mean, it should be the very rare mistake, and it should be a mistake and should be very heavily scrutinized and punished, as opposed to Obama, who's this, stand-up guy, great dude. 90% of his drone strikes killed. And it's not exclusive to Obama. Trump is running up similar numbers. There's a story about a little boy that was killed in an Obama drone strike, and then his sister got killed by a Trump drone strike.
Did the ends justify the means?
Not there.
Yeah,
I think they
so
can
too.
in certain cases, but definitely not there. There's really no reason we should be. There's some reasons, human rights violations, I think should be a motive for maybe not going to war, but at least trying to fix that. But why we're there right now doesn't make sense to me. And
Trump did want to get us out of Syria and other places and pull troops back out of the
establishment
Middle
on
East.
both sides fought against that. They were
dude.
You can't. He even tried to pull people out of. Germany. He tried to pull troops out of, and it was, we can't do this. This is gonna cost so much money. It's not gonna cost more to keep. He tried to pull 12,000 of our 36,000 troops out of Germany, We have 36,000 troops stationed in Germany.
It's not real.
A country that we're allied with. The city we live in is...
Yeah, Germany's like one of the safest countries in the world.
Yeah, like there's more troops stationed in Germany than the city we live in right now. And it like that doesn't make sense to me at all. And there's the argument that, oh, it's for NATO, it's for like protecting against Russia, but
Dude, Russia's like not like...
Well, and
the thing, actually, I don't know. I was going to say Russia's not an antagonist, but I saw what they did to Ukraine, and I'm like...
No, they are an antagonist for sure, but like...
Antagonist.
36,000 troops in Germany seems crazy to me.
That's like war numbers. 36,000 troops stationed in Germany?
Yeah, if you told me we were going to war with a country and sent 36,000 troops, I'd be like, okay,
I'd be like, dang,
for
yeah,
war,
okay.
like that's a lot of troops.
Yeah.
But we have them stationed there in peacetime, in a country that we're allied with.
It's weird, huh?
Yeah, I don't know. I want to talk a little bit about, I saw an article about a teacher from a private school that's teaching like high schoolers, talking about how her students she was seeing were being radicalized to the alt-right by sources like Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so I'm a Democrat, but if Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson are alt-right, then I am very alt-right.
Like,
don't sound like that.
Well, yeah, that's weird to me. Like, if you think, you must be so out of touch with reality to think that Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson are alt-right.
Dude, that's what I'm saying. Like, those guys aren't alt-right. You want to know who alt-right is? Like, someone like KKK members and like...
That's alt-right. I mean, like...
What's that Congressman King? I don't know if you've heard about this, but that dude's like legitimate alt-right. He was a congressman. He got kicked off committee. He has to sit in like the back of the Congress because...
Ooh, I don't know.
Dude,
he
was like...
You
haven't heard about this?
Mm-mm.
He was affiliated with like literal racist organizations, like straight KKK racist like stuff.
That's alt-right, not Joe Rogan who like...
Dude,
I mean,
the guy's
borderline
he's
socialist.
borderline democratic socialist, but yeah, like for sure.
Yeah, and it's funny because they
and Jordan Peterson is like a liberal. He's like a classical liberal.
He's a classical liberal, and but the reasoning the teacher gave in the article for like being concerned about that.
Where was this article?
It was in I can't remember. I saw it on another podcast that I listened to. They talked about it. I think it was in the Washington Examiner, which I don't think is...
Yeah, it's a little bull crappy.
But I think it's a real story. Like, their commentary on it, but I think we can create our own commentary on it. That it just... The reasoning the teacher gave in an interview about it was that she wanted to promote critical thinking, and listening to Joe Rogan and reading Jordan Peterson was not critical thinking, and she'd hoped that her students would trust her enough to just believe her.
Dude, that is authoritarianism.
That's
like
the opposite of critical thinking.
Dude, that's like just sit down and obey.
Just
do what I
listen,
say,
don't explore.
or you're a racist. And this is what has always driven me crazy about the Democratic Party is like the lack of critical thinking. Because she's not alone. That teacher's not alone.
Oh no,
the Democratic Party is shifting that direction where you're gonna sit down and you're gonna obey. And if you don't obey, you're going to be canceled and you're going to be called a racist and you're never going to be able to get a job. You're never going to be able to show your face in public again. You can go ahead and delete all your social media accounts because we're going to make sure those tech companies ban you.
Yeah.
Like, these are all things that are happening. So, like, this teacher is, like, not alone. Like,
oh, and what's crazy is, I mean, I'm a fan of Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
Mostly because he talks to everyone.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't just isolate himself to one side of the political spectrum. He talks to everybody. So I think there's so much value in discourse and listening to people and getting their views, even if you don't specifically agree with them. And there's definitely ideologies that are beyond the pale that you shouldn't really be courting or giving a platform. But I don't think Joe Rogan, for the most part, has done that ever. So to claim that he's alt-right there's no knowledge.
The bar is so low.
There's obviously this teacher has never listened to Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
She's just read the articles about, oh, Joe Rogan had Ben Shapiro on his show. He had Alex Jones on his show. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me that you could go and take that and say,
yeah, the people you are affiliated with will make you alt-right apparently now.
well, not even
affiliated with.
There's no affiliation. It's just that you talked, you had a discussion, you talked to them. And I've seen, I mean, that's happened so much that, I mean, Joe Rogan got huge backlash for the people that he's talked to.
Gavin McInnes.
Just for talking to them. He even comes down like hard against, like, he'll grill people that he disagrees with about stuff that he doesn't agree with, and he just gets blasted by media. And I don't think, I mean, it's not, like you were saying earlier, it's not unique. I think that's so much more common than you could make the argument that it's this small portion of people that do it. No,
it's not.
It's large, and it's large enough that people are having it's having a serious impact on their lives.
Mm-hmm.
The Washington Post ran a story about a random lady, not affiliated with the Washington Post. She happened to go to a party like 3 years ago with a Washington Post reporter. Like, not together, they were just at the same party. And she went as what was it? It was,
I think I remember this.
It was like
it was
Kelly
something...
Ripa or Kellyanne Conway. No, it wasn't Kellyanne Conway. I can't remember. Some reporter that got in trouble for saying something about blackface. She went as her in blackface, which is in poor taste, like awful idea. But so the story is, she showed up to the party. Everyone at the party was like, oh my gosh, like, what are you doing? Like, you should not be doing this. And she left the party. Next day, called the host, apologized. She was like, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. She's been in counseling. Like, it shook her up that bad that she's like, I need to figure out why I thought that was okay and go to counseling and determine that. The Washington Post published a story about her 3 years after this happened. This random lady, she lost her job.
Dude, they don't forgive and they don't forget.
There's no...
Give it like 20 years, like something that we'll say on the podcast.
Which is scary, but I think it's important to, like...
Yeah, I don't
talk and have these discussions, because...
As soon as you start letting these crazy people, like, control what you say, that's when you can, like, kiss goodbye to, like, American... Like, your values being important.
That's one of the best things about America, is that we have...
free speech is like still one of the highest, like, most protected freedoms in the United States.
In our Constitution, like the seminal document towards like our government, that free speech is important. And I mean, obviously that story about the Washington Post isn't so much free speech, but it's just scary that this random lady, I mean, I could understand maybe if you run it and it's like a Washington Post reporter, maybe it makes sense. This is a lady with zero affiliation to the Washington Post, just happened to be at a party with a reporter and made a mistake that was bad, but obviously realized she was wrong and was like changed.
Has the Washington Post said anything after they did all this and she got fired? Have they like come out and said anything, or like...
I don't know. I haven't really followed up with the story, but I just remember hearing that story.
I do remember hearing that story.
Sick that, I mean, she's not even a public figure. It's a private figure that, I mean, it's kind of what happened with the Covington kid, that all these news outlets ran these stories and just, I mean, eviscerated him in the media. And I think this one didn't get as much attention because it wasn't, I mean, there wasn't video or anything, but it just goes to show you that there's no limit to what they kind of will hold against you. Yep. It even happened with we talked about the people speaking at the RNC, the Missouri couple with the guns. So what they did, I don't like, but they even said, I mean, they were like Democrats. They weren't, I mean, they said they supported like the Black Lives Matter protest, were just scared because people were coming onto their property. and they just got dragged in the media, and stuff like that is going to push people further right, like to the Republican Party.
Will it?
I think so. I don't know how.
I don't know if it pushes moderates more to the right. I think that it certainly
should.
pushes Republicans more to the right. So I think give it 10, 15 years, like I think you've been seeing like a populist movement of politicians becoming more comfortable and being more conservative. Look at Bolsonaro in Brazil, Trump, Boris Johnson. Like,
Yeah.
these are all like, it's sort of culminating in this populist movement because of, as it's a reaction, right?
Yeah.
As soon as the Democrats started getting more progressive, the Republicans started getting
it's
more
super
populist.
reactionary, and
yeah.
it just shoots everybody out on the side,
Yep.
and that's not the way to balance a system.
And that's where I kind of think Joe Biden, sorry to interrupt. That's
No,
where I
you're
kind of think Joe Biden is like a good choice. Like, I don't think, first of all, I think he would make a better president than Trump, even in his current state.
Yeah.
I think he'd be a better president than Trump. But he's sort of a return, as much as I hate the establishment and I can't stand some of the stuff that goes on in like foreign policy and all that. Joe Biden would be a return to normal, right? Which I don't know if most people want normal, but if you don't want things to get worse, elect Joe Biden. If you do want things to get more divided, I can tell you that 4 more years of Trump means the next election in 2024, the Republicans are going to run a populist that they know can win, that says crazy things.
Yeah.
And the Democrats are going to run a socialist that says crazy things that they think will be able to counter whatever the Republicans run. So that's where I think that Joe Biden will be proof that a moderate can win an election.
Yeah.
And I think that if he wins, you'll see the Republicans run a moderate in 2024.
Yeah.
Even though it didn't work with Mitt Romney or John McCain.
Yeah. November is going to be crazy. November is going to be wild.
I think it's either going to be a blowout or Trump's going to win. I don't think it's going to be like close Joe Biden wins.
Yeah. You don't think?
I don't think so. I think Joe Biden will win. If he goes on to win the election, I think he'll have won almost every single swing state.
Maybe. Yeah. I could see
Except for
that.
Texas and Florida. Texas and Florida are both going to Trump. That's 100%.
I think so. I think so too. But it's just going to be wild, and with the mail-in voting, like we won't know that night who won. It'll be this extended process where votes are still coming in.
Weird.
And it's going to be a nightmare. I think no matter what the results are, you'll get if Trump wins, think about what happened after he got elected in 2016 times 10. And we're already in this, like, the country's already in this kind of state of, like, a mentality where it's like, oh, we see these issues, like, let's protest. And then if Trump gets elected, it's going to be crazy. And I think if Biden gets elected, it's going to be wild too.
Really? See, I think
it'll be worse if Trump gets elected.
Yeah.
If Biden gets elected, I think there's probably a little, like, some unrest for a little bit, but not that much. And I've heard I would call it a conspiracy theory that if Trump doesn't win, he won't leave office and they'll have to drag him out. I don't agree with that. Trump's even said when he's been asked about it, he's like, what do you do if you don't win in November? And he's like, I'll probably just go do something else. Like, I don't leave. Which, yeah, I don't subscribe to that's going to be the source of the unrest, but I think there's going to be a lot of people that are unhappy and especially with the mail-in voting and that being like an extended period of time where people are uncertain, that always breeds unrest. And so, yeah, November will be...
Dude, there's going to be some issues with that mail-in voting. There is going to be it's going to be Bush v. Gore again.
It's going to be worse than that.
Yeah.
Because, so who determines how lenient you are on, like, signatures and
someone that is into politics, probably someone that has a political opinion is probably going to determine what a valid signature looks like.
Yeah. And so I think I'm not so much concerned about fraud with mail-in voting, but it's like you end up with I mean, we've already seen that tens of thousands of votes are being thrown out because of discrepancies in signatures when they get sent in. And we see that, and some states get decided by,
10,000 votes.
Swing states, get decided by 10,000 votes. So what happens if 50,000 votes in a state get thrown out?
It could come down to that too. It could come down to a state like Arizona or Nevada.
It could come down to one of those crucial like swing states. And if we have uncertainty on the vote count, I don't know what.
Like I said, I just think Biden will either win in a landslide or those swing state or like I think if Biden has what it takes to win Pennsylvania, he'll probably I don't know though because polls are starting to go to. I think he wins Pennsylvania. I think he loses Ohio. I think Trump wins Ohio. I think Trump wins Arizona. And I think that I don't know because with Arizona's
close.
Federally,
Pennsylvania though, he came out and said he was going to ban fracking. Joe Biden, no fracking. Complete stop on fracking. I think that's important to the voters in Pennsylvania. That's a big industry. But I don't know. It's going to come down to those swing states. And that's why the mail-in voting is even scarier because it's going to be close in a lot of those states. And it's going to be uncertain. We're not going to know. I mean, just by the nature of mail-in voting, we're not going to know in one night. And then we're not going to know what votes are valid, what. It's just going to be, it's going to be a nightmare.
Who do you think wins? Well, I think people are saying Texas is going to go blue.
I don't think it's going to go blue.
I don't think Texas is going to go blue. I think that would be insane because if Texas goes blue for Biden, it's like they could look at like Beto O'Rourke, right? Like
he got crushed. People thought he was going to do good. He got crushed.
Yeah, how weird was that? Like he was like, do you know how much money they funneled into Beto O'Rourke's campaign?
Much. Well, that's all over. I mean, it's weird. It's a little bit off topic as far as like Democrat versus Republican, but even in Democratic primaries, there's been all over in the primaries, you've seen the kind of establishment candidate, incumbent, like not progressive candidate is getting tons of money funneled into their campaign from out of state donors.
Like AOC. Not in the primaries, obviously, but in her congressional run, ton of out-of-state donors.
Well, but even, Cory
Booker.
No.
Corey Lewandowski.
No. So Jamal Bowman, this is an example. He was
that doesn't even sound like Corey. That's just a completely different name.
I'm trying to think. He's there's some Corey that is kind of in a similar situation. Jamal Bowman was running against some establishment candidate, and I think he ended up winning. But the candidate he was running against, I can't remember her name. I think 90% of the money she received was from out of state.
And she was a super progressive?
No, she was not progressive. She was the kind of Democratic establishment, like toe the line.
Gotcha.
Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Democrat.
Wait, did this happen recently?
Yeah, it was very recently.
What it was Jamal Bowman was his name?
Yeah, I think so. I'm pretty sure. I'm not 100% sure.
Hold on.
But I think that there's a big. I don't like that you can just send money from out of state for these candidates and take. You'd think there'd be more donations from in-state would be a good indicator of how popular the candidate is. And the fact that these candidates are getting just absolutely out fundraised in their state, but then receive tons of money from out of state is just wild to me that that's even allowed, that you can do that. But I don't know. I just think, and that's happened in a lot of races, Democrat versus Republican, or even Democrat versus more progressive Democrat.
So going back to the Jamal Bowman thing, do you remember what the name of the woman was? What state was it? Because I remember I was like really interested in this. Like I found like an article of like it was a Senate race, right?
Oh, it was Was it Tennessee? Where's Mitch McConnell? I think it was the person to
Mitch
run against Mitch
McConnell
McConnell.
Oh shoot, it's something with a, what's it called? It's a southern state. It's like Kansas. Is Kansas a state? Why can't I remember?
Kansas is a state.
I keep thinking Kansas City, Missouri. I'm like, what?
No. I think it was Mitch McConnell's state. It was the primary for whoever was going to run against him. So they might not win. They probably won't win the general election.
Right.
But it was like in the primary there was Jamal Bowman with who is fairly progressive and very popular among voters, especially recently, like towards the end of the election, towards the end of the primary, was very popular. And then you had this kind of establishment Democrat that didn't seem to be as popular, but was just getting massive amounts. I think she got the Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi endorsement. Yeah. So that's just, it's crazy to me that's a thing that really happened.
Have you heard about that? She's running for Senate too. She's like a restaurant owner that is a gun rights activist.
She was the haircut lady.
No.
Right?
She's running, right?
Yeah.
She's running or something like that. Or I can't remember.
Is this not who you're talking about? You're talking about someone different?
I'm not sure. It might be the same person. I think she was a restaurant owner though. I think she was like an open carry restaurant owner where you put your big old 50 cal on your back and you walk into the restaurant and eat a sandwich. And then you look at your buddy and he has his rocket launcher on his back.
His RPG. And I haven't heard about that.
Yeah, but I think I don't know. There's a lot of really weird people running for Senate and Congress.
Yeah.
There's always been weird people that have ran.
I think so too. I think it's
but we don't know them because there's 500 members of Congress.
There's a million, and you don't. And then there's all the primaries and all the people running, so you don't know it. You just hear about.
I can recognize senators a lot better than I can recognize Congress
for sure.
People.
Yeah. There's a lot of weird people though running.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've heard more about it. There's been increased scrutiny and less with COVID and stuff. There's been less. I don't know. We've had more time to kind of pay attention to that stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like, and so, yeah. But definitely a lot of weird stuff. I wanted to kind of switch topics a little bit, or switch directions a little bit away from politics, and talk about a little bit pop culture, a little bit economics, but how you think that coronavirus will change. We were talking a little bit before about Tenet, the new Christopher Nolan movie that's going to come out, has kind of been heralded as the savior of cinema that's going to bring back this tide. And just kind of, I wanted to get your opinion on how coronavirus and things that have happened and lockdown and restrictions are going to affect industries like that need crowds, sporting events, movies.
So I think that, first of all, coronavirus was so mishandled that what shouldn't have put businesses in jeopardy, or I shouldn't say shouldn't, because it definitely could have, but I think that it was so mishandled that we should have spent money more efficiently, right? We did PPP, we did the CARES Act. I think both of those were,
well, the economic impact could have been mitigated greatly.
Right. I think that there are some stats I've heard that 40% of restaurants are going to go out of business. Some of these crazy
it's 40 to
stats.
50% of small businesses might not
not
ever open up again. And it's just, and
I think the movie industry is probably one of those that was just beaten by coronavirus.
Oh, for sure, because
one of them declared bankruptcy, didn't they?
Who was it?
Or they were borderline going to AMC. I think their stock price decreased by
Oh yeah, all the movie the movie, not studios as much, but still studios were hit hard, but movie theater chains were just destroyed. So I've heard it's either going to go one of two ways with that. Is you're either only going to have little tiny single screen theaters and everything else will just be on video on demand, how they released they're doing Mulan.
Yeah.
that type of release, or we'll get like massive stadium theaters.
Yeah.
But it's crazy that we're gonna see these lasting impacts on kind of industries that haven't seen a ton of change in a long time that could like fundamentally shape that. And like sporting events, how long is it before people are comfortable to go sit in the stands with 20,000 other basketball fans or like 80,000 other football fans in
I
a
think
stadium?
it'll be sooner than you think.
You think?
I think Trump sort of won the long game with Corona, like by attacking it. I don't think it's right to like attack what, like people wearing masks. He's like, I don't know. Trump's such a weirdo, but I think he won the long game because people are like getting tired of coronavirus. Like you couldn't shut down a state again. Like you couldn't completely shut down a state again. Like I don't think people are going to accept it.
Yeah.
Like if California were to go say quarantine 14 days, everybody again, I don't think people would do it.
Yeah, I just think I've seen a lot of people. I mean, some of those theaters, like specifically movie theaters, because obviously sports venues aren't opening up again, and movie theaters is one thing that usually draws a bigger crowd in kind of a confined space, but they're struggling to fill seats. They're running at like 30% capacity or something, like super socially distanced. Yeah, movie.
Well, that's because no good movies have been released lately.
But you'd think, I mean, they're even doing, I think AMC was running a deal where they were selling 15-cent tickets.
Really?
Tickets were 15 cents. Yeah, and can't fill the theater.
Well, did you hear that? I'm not sure how familiar you are with this situation, but Trolls 2
made
world tour
about as much money as they expected.
Yeah,
video on demand.
and AMC retaliated and said like, we're never going to show your studio's films in our theaters again.
Yeah, but I mean that's it's gonna be weird, but Trolls World Tour might.
Yeah, it was like a proof of concept.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting because Mulan is supposed to release in the next week, which probably
Digitally?
has. Yeah, video on demand. It's gonna be, you'll pay kind of the same concept as the.
See, why would Disney not have like a video on demand in the Disney Plus app?
They do.
Oh, they do.
Yeah, that's where it's gonna be.
You're gonna rent it from Disney Plus.
Yeah, rent it from Disney Plus.
Oh shoot.
So it'll be interesting to see, because why risk if it makes as much money as they expected it to make? And
do you think it will?
I think it will, because we're still, all
Really?
theaters are closed and everything, and I think that Mulan, like, people are pretty excited for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it will, but I think it'll be interesting to see. I don't know how much you can read into it, because people are still stuck, theaters aren't open, people are still scared. But if it keeps working and theaters keep doing it, like, why do I go to... TVs are so good now, and people have big TVs, or just, I mean, TVs that they can use and watch movies on. Why go to a theater?
The concessions. Like, I think the experience. I think that's why I went to a theater, right?
Yeah. So that's where the like big stadium seating theaters, that idea came in, is because if you're going, like, if I want to see the new Avengers movie, I want to see it with a bunch of other people and hear all the reactions and stuff. But what if I'm watching some movie that I don't really care about, like Frozen 3 comes out, and I'm watching it with my family? Do I really care to like be in the theater? Yeah. So I think that's where you could see a lot of family movies, to me, end up.
Yeah, I could see that.
Just going video on demand if it works, because do you want to drag four kids to the theater, yeah. And the studio avoids the split with the theater,
yeah,
and
like 10%.
People, well, yeah, the way it works is a lot of times in the first week or two,
they make nothing, right?
The theaters make nothing, yeah.
Yeah.
And then as it goes on, the longer it shows in the theater, they start making more of that. But you could see where, I mean, like, I think Trolls World Tour was a perfect proof of concept for that, as like a family movie. Yeah. That I don't care about seeing this with, like, you. I mean, I'm sure parents were just like, I just want to put this on, like, my kids just want to see it, like, they're not super interested, and there's no benefit to being in an audience with a bunch of people. And so why would you ever go to the theater and pay more than you're paying for the on demand? I'd rather make
popcorn is like $9.
I'd rather make 15-cent popcorn and like pour, even if you, because you could run to some store and get drinks, get soda, and not have to pay the ridiculous prices. So I think that's one way that like coronavirus has probably changed. We'll see a lot more video on demand, straight to video on demand.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think runs in theaters will be so much shorter. Like instead of running for like 2 months in a theater or like a month and a half, whatever, you could see like 2 weeks. It's in the theater for 2 weeks and then goes straight to video on demand through the streamer, which could kill movie theaters.
Dude, how weird is it that we live in a time where the preview trailer for Tenet was shown on Fortnite? How crazy is that?
Yeah, that's
like an
whole
exclusive preview.
Christopher
was seen on
Nolan,
Fortnite.
this guy that, yeah, and it's and I think that's a interesting kind of, not telling, but like it shows a little bit of the mentality of like where audiences are and where they kind of get their media. That it's Tenet, this like big blockbuster Christopher Nolan kind of prestige director. They had a movie called Prestige, but like in the sense that like these big movies that are competing for Oscars.
Yeah, dude.
Showed a trailer in Fortnite.
It shows how big video games are. The video game industry is bigger than the music and movie industries combined.
Yeah.
The video game industry is ginormous.
Yeah. And it is yeah, and so it just shows that, and even, I mean, we've seen it in politics that like traditional kind of establishment things are breaking down, and it's kind of all over. I mean, who would have thought like 15 years ago, if you said that you were going to have a streaming service where you could watch every Disney movie ever and like new stuff like that, crazy. Like the new Star Wars TV show is coming out, and just kind of the change, the dramatic shift in media and how people consume media is like changing the, I mean, entertainment landscape, the political landscape. I mean, I know a ton of people that get all their news off of YouTube.
That's me. That's a lot of me.
Yeah, 90%
no,
for
of
sure.
my news.
And they get all their, I mean, they don't know cable, nothing like that. It's just streaming services.
Yeah,
and
we
so
don't have cable.
Yeah, so it's super interesting that how much of a change that is, and that you're starting to get, and I think that was already happening, and with coronavirus, it's just accelerating it.
Yeah.
That there's less of a demand for in-person things like that, and more of a demand for, oh, I want this now, like in-home, personal, on my phone, on my own TV. And so coronavirus took an industry that was already dealing with that change and just sped it up times 10.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Coronavirus has done a lot of like things that I think everyone like reevaluated everything. It changed everything.
Oh, it's going to change. One thing that it's going to, I mean, I don't think people are going to go into the office anymore. Like if people can work from home,
working from home,
so many more. Because I think there's been a realization that you can do a lot more from home than companies thought. Like you don't need to be in the office. I think it'll destroy the like business travel. Like I don't know how much people travel for business anymore, because it's like you just do a conference call. You hop on a conference call that you've been doing and has worked. But it's just, yeah, every aspect of life has been just drastically changed by coronavirus.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see as we come out of it how much people just go back to normal, kind of what it was like before, and how much it leaves a lasting impact on all that stuff.
That'll be interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It seems like, I think people are getting like sick of corona though.
For sure.
Sick. Like I think what should have happened is like we should have had like
a 6-week to 2-month lockdown, just complete lockdown.
6 weeks
at the start, at the very start. I think that gets rid of coronavirus. I don't think we have a coronavirus issue. And then
Yeah.
everyone wears masks outside for the next 3 to 4 months. Coronavirus is a thing of the past and doesn't affect anything. And you might even not need 6 to 8 weeks.
And everyone should have gotten like 80% of their salary just paid like Britain did. And
Yeah, so
we
it
got a
doesn't-
$1,200 check, and they're not going to come out with another stimulus. Like, I think it's pretty fair to say like the Democrats and Republicans are a freaking joke.
They're not gonna.
Trump
get on
literally had to
anything.
do it himself, and there's like hardly any stimulus in there besides like unemployment benefits going on,
And you don't even have. I mean, and there's different ways to do it. I mean, like Sweden it's basically like coronavirus never happened, and they just let it pass.
Yeah, they
Like, they
went
didn't-
for herd immunity.
They didn't really do anything about it, and we did this weird like
In between.
split where we sort of shut down the economy, sort of like kept
We
people.
left it up to the states.
Yeah, exactly, and
Then
so
that's where it became a political issue, in my opinion. As soon as you left it up to the states.
yeah, and so we didn't have the opportunity to just, let it pass through, and it's a harsh judgment to say just let it pass through, and the people that are immunocompromised or old just have to do their best to avoid it, and just they deal with it like Sweden did. Or and as much as I don't like, take say like New Zealand. New Zealand's done a really good job with it, and they shut down like pretty hard, and they obviously have it easier with a smaller population, like on an island.
Right.
But they shut down pretty hard, and then now they're kind of out of. They don't really have any cases anymore.
Yeah.
But we kind of straddled the line. We didn't want to tell anybody what to do, but we felt we couldn't just do nothing, and that like placed a super heavy burden like economically on businesses, and also extended the pandemic because we couldn't go all the way either direction. Yeah.
Should we call it?
Yep, let's call it there. That was
Ooh,
a good one.
episode 5.
Episode 5 over.